One moment.
It's just too late. It's starting and it's recording now. All righty, here we go.
Hello.
Let me open up the stream in YouTube.
One moment.
It's just too late. Okay. How to fix that? All right. I'm just gonna tweet out real quick that we're live.
I will retweet you. This is a little bit off topic, but did you notice that Chris Brennan went private on Twitter?
I did. Did you hear about any of that?
I didn't. I can only
We'll have to talk about
speculate.
that another time because we are
Yeah.
right now.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 on reading Rhetorius. And today we're gonna be talking about the decans, the fixed stars, the bounds, the rising times, and like zodiacal melethesia, which is corresponding body parts to signs. So
Yes. Hello, everybody.
yeah, this is
As always, I will say you can purchase your copy of Rhetorius the Egyptian, published from the American Federation of Astrologers. You can buy it online. They have some specific in-person retailers, but they do have their own AFA store in Arizona. So if you want to get your copy, check it out. We are still pretty early on in the text, though. So if you don't have a copy, Google Books has a free segment of the book available online.
yeah. Also, I think I just realized, and this may be my fault, and I don't know why I did this because I already tested it ahead of time, but the streaming link is different than the one that was first sent out. So the tweet that I just tweeted has the right link.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's unfortunate. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay. Well,
But the link,
yay, Jared. Jared just said that he bought his copy last week and has it in front of him today.
yay!
Awesome.
Hey, Jared.
So glad to have you with us. Yeah, so let's just chat about this. Chapters 10 to 14. What are your like overall thoughts on this as we get started?
I mean, I think it's really fascinating how like the Decans come up like so soon on into the text. I mean, just contrasting that with like coming up from a modern lens, like hearing about the Decans was just such a like foreign thing for me. I was already like familiar with the zodiac. And so I think it's really cool to see how primal this part of astrology is and how integral it is in the tradition. Yeah, I also thought it was really fascinating that he doesn't give delineations for all 3 decans for all 3 signs. He skips some of them. So,
Yeah, he does lump some of them together.
yeah.
Which yeah, we'll talk about each of them. But yeah, it is that's a great point because the decans really are, like when we think about it this way, like, okay, we had the decans like as this huge system in ancient Egypt, and then in Babylon, like they had the zodiac, and then they kind of merged. But like horoscopic astrology still kind of emerged like in Egypt. Not to say that they weren't casting horoscopes, natal horoscopes like in Mesopotamia, but like it's interesting how, the roots really had the decans incorporated from the really early on stages of the development of horoscopic astrology in Egypt, including, the use of the decans. And we'll look at like how Rhetorius talks about Teucer of Babylon, who was an ancient astrologer in the Cairo, who was like, super like important formative text like on the decans. and yeah, like how often they would use them in interpretation. Like we don't have a lot that survives from that, but there is that Teucer text, which we were just talking about. Maybe we'll do another episode just reading that.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know preferences,
Yeah.
likes, dislikes. Yeah,
Well,
what you
maybe we
guys
can,
as we like dapple with that.
yeah.
The appendix in the back of the book
Mhm.
has some of Teucer's like literary work. So let
Mhm.
us know.
Yeah.
Um, Also, I think it's all very fascinating that the ascendant and the midheaven, or at least the ascendant, like specifically, played a super key role. Like, I mean, the decans played a super key role in the like conceptual principle of the sign that's rising. Like, it wasn't just the sign, it was the decan that it was
Right.
associated with. And
Right.
that was what gave us the foundation for the houses to follow later. And I think that
Right.
that's like really, really interesting.
Yeah. And like I know like when Schmidt was sort of formulating his like like he called it like the system of Hermes or whatever that included like, the Hermetic lots, the 12 parts, like the rising decan was like one of these like seven things that he thought was like a part of every astrologer's kind of initial take on reading a chart. And like Hephaestio and Teucer and through Teucer, Rhetorius are like some of the only authors that we have that have like kept full delineations for all the decans. But yeah, like that was um super crucial. Like, and even like for um in ancient Egypt, for instance, like these ancient like priests who worked in these temples, they were always tracking which decan was rising. That was how they kept time. But like we also know there's this one fragment from this text called like the Salmes Kiniaka, which outlined a 36 house system where
Mm.
like your 18th house is like the 18th decan from the ascendant, and like that's about like I don't have them all memorized, but like that's about your marriage, and like the seventh is like your children, and like the ninth is like death, and like the 28th is like your work and what you do, and like so there's a whole other like mysterious system that like we only have this tiny bit from. So the decans are like, yeah, the decans are awesome. And
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, and also like by the time that we reached the medieval era, we had astrologers who were like numerically tallying things just like as a reference. So, like, how many points does this planet have? But a planet in its own decan is 1 point. Like it was seen as like a very small aid for the planet. And
Mm,
that might have something to do with why it became less like focused in the tradition because it became used as a way to gauge a planet's dignity versus like a sliver of zodiacal archetype.
mhm.
Like maybe this isn't so much a question of how dignified is a planet in its own decan, but like what does this decan say about this segment of the zodiac, your chart, your life, your experience? And
Right.
I really love the idea of taking the houses and applying that principle to the decans or even like the bounds if we were able to,
Yeah.
like I think that that's like a really, really cool, very useful kind of approach to things.
Yeah. It's interesting though that you mentioned that too, because you also mentioned like how he talks about decans so early on, and he actually brings them up before he talks about the bounds, which is
Mhm.
interesting because like later on, even though he is like sort of drifting into medieval, like not too long after him, they were giving 2 points to bounds and 1 point for a decan. And like those would often be introduced like in that order. But he gives the decans first, which is interesting. Um, but also like even though what was I going to say? Um, oh, right. Like, even though the decans were either like eventually like only got 1 point and even earlier, like, for instance, Ptolemy like doesn't include decan as an essential dignity. Like, he just has up to bounds, and his fifth essential dignity, like dignity point, is like phase. Like, they
Mhm.
use solar phase as like the fifth criteria. Which is interesting. But like, yeah, I mean, we know they were super important, like, especially even outside of natal astrology, like for medical astrology, they had a ton of purposes for like that kind of mixture between magical and medical astrology, like consecrating talismans to help protect against certain illnesses. And even for the Egyptians, like they gave names and deities to each of these 36 decans. Like these played such a fundamental role in their conceptualization of the whole world. And it's sad to think how much we've lost, but I mean, hopefully we can just keep recovering things from that tradition. And so we'll hopefully be doing a little bit of that today by reading this little excerpt from Rhetorius. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. All right. Do you want to dive right in? I think it's your turn to go first, right?
Um,
I forget.
I think I started the first one and then you, so okay. And the second one, so yeah, okay. Chapter 10, 36 decans and the Pranatolanta and the faces. Since the zodiacal circle is divided into 12 sections, i.e. into 12 signs, the ancients suggested another 36 sections, which they called decans, and they distributed these by sign to govern 10 degrees, whence they are called decans. The previously mentioned Paranatolanta in the zodiacal circle lie under these decans, and they have the faces of the 7 stars, which have sympathy with the stars that are placed upon them. Should we chat about that real quick?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
hold and talk about this because that footnote is like I feel like super important.
Yeah.
So Holden has a footnote here that says the Decans were originally 36 asterisms, so stars, constellations, identified by the Egyptians and used to tell time at night. The Alexandrians regularized their lengths to 10 degrees each, whence the name Decan meant a ruler of 10, assigned planetary rulers to them, and parceled them out 3 each to the 12 signs. So there were 36 stars, constellations that were identified by the Egyptians, and then that was regularized, standardized, and like made. I there's like a specific word I'm looking of that looking for that evades me, but
Yeah, like solidified into the tradition.
yeah,
Yeah.
like they made it more
Canonized.
concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, you get what I'm getting
Yeah.
at.
And like I know also like Ptolemy talks about like and another authors too, like 36 extra zodiacal constellations. Like there's the 12 of the zodiac, but then like 36 additional constellations that are like northern or southern that are like above the zodiacal, um, the path of the sun, the ecliptic, and several constellations that were below. So somehow they were essentially looking at the sky at any given time when one of these decans was rising. This big Greek word paranatolanta means co-rising. So they would look out, at the east at which decan was arising and noting all along the sphere, all along the horizon, which constellations co-rise with that. And it will be slightly different in each latitude. And so that also means that those co-rising constellations or pranatolanta will be different in your latitude. Like different constellations will rise with different degrees of the zodiac. So that's also why I think there's a lot of variation or mystery with like this, because you had different authors in different areas that maybe said, oh, well, the horn of the bull's rising with this one, but the woman sitting in the throne, like whatever it was. And so I think that's why, it's complex. Like this is a really, more multifaceted and advanced version of tracking celestial movements. So yeah, there's going to be that variation.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess the last thing about that, he just says like they have the faces of the 7 stars, and like face is another word they often use to talk about the decans, like particularly because of this idea of Pranatolanta being like co-rising images. Constellations are visual pictures put together by us. So like the face or a decan is literally like the image that would be co-rising there. So you'll often see them write the face of the stars, which means like the decan it's in, which literally just means like when they're making these talismans or inscribing images on these amulets, they're literally drawing, what's the image that's rising at that time. So he might refer to face and he just means decan here.
Yeah, I mean, in the Picatrix, that's an interesting like linguistic kind of cross. Like in the Picatrix, when they talk about their decanic talismans and stuff like that, and the images
Mm,
of the signs and things like that, it talks about like faces, like a man with a pale face, a flat
mm,
face, holding a like black staff above his head, like something like that. And
right.
that's a really interesting connection there that could very well be like the where that name came from, the fact that they were drawing like faces.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, Yeah, and so just like that there he just mentions in those phases that they're assigned to the seven stars. So
Mhm.
there's this rulership system where we go beginning from Mars and then going that descending Chaldean order in each decan and then resetting to Saturn after the moon. If you guys are familiar with the decanic rulerships, that's how it works. If you're not, then we'll be going one by one and explaining what each one is, and we'll say who the ruler is. But yeah, do you want to take on the next paragraph here?
Yeah. All right. So, for example, suppose the sun to be in 10 degrees of Aries in the first decan in the face of Mars. Now, since we have said that the sun signifies the mental characteristics, you will find the mind of this individual to be manly, irascible, delighting in war, fond of weapons, and such like. But suppose again the sun to be in 20 degrees of Aries in the second decan in the face of the sun. It signifies this individual to be magnanimous and loving fame and fond of honor and no longer delighting in war. But suppose again the sun to be in 30 degrees of Aries in the third decan, the face of Venus. It signifies this individual to be womanly in spirit, womanish in appearance, shameful, lustful, and such like. And so, like, here we have that what he says earlier about how the faces are characterized by the seven stars. We see that kind of in action now, right? So, like a normal standard interpretation of Mars, someone who's brash and likes war, you see like Mars's sign with Mars's face is an irascible person who likes war. Put the sun there, it becomes a more kingly, more noble figure. With Venus there, you've got that blend of like Venusian and martial archetypes.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, like the comment he makes that if we're just looking at the sun, we know the sun signifies the spirit and the mind. So he's just saying that, whatever decan your sun is in will, that planet that rules your sun's decan will qualify your spirit and your intellect and your mind and your soul. But maybe, for your moon, it could also be a more physical appearance kind of thing, versus your Venus showing like what kind of pleasure you like to take. And he talks about that towards the end of the book. We'll come back to the in the later chapters where he talks about like the Decan of Venus and how, these things are just get these slight modifications. Just like we'd change any delineation based on the sign, the Decan is just another refinement of that, pretty much.
Do you want to just alternate
Yeah.
paragraphs?
Yeah.
Or we can do like two at a time because these are kind of short.
Yeah. Well, maybe how about I'll just read this next paragraph and do Aries, and then we'll just rotate from there.
Okay.
Okay. See how in one sign, three differences of the mind followed one at a time. And within the decans and their pronatalanta and the faces are the astrological influences set forth by Teucer of Babylon. And we shall recall it in part thusly. You must know that each individual sign has three decans, and each decan was allotted 10 degrees, and in each degree the sun makes 24 hours, or one day and night. So here we begin. Or, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Are we, I'm sorry, we're not flipping back to the appendix yet, are we?
I mean, yeah, we were maybe gonna like read what Toyka wrote for some of the decans. Um, you want to just do like Aries?
Yeah.
Okay, just to give an idea, because he expounds a bit more. Rhetorius is pretty concise, and that he says that we shall recall it in part. So he's writing
Yeah.
that he's not restating everything that Toyka wrote. But if you have the book and want to read them, they're all in the first appendix. So you can go back there and read what he's potentially working from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
I'm just reading the beginning part, yeah?
Um,
Or do you want me to read the Twyker section too?
you read Toyker, I'll read the
Okay.
first three that he gives for Aries.
Okay.
In the first Decan of Aries, it makes dangers, plots, fluctuations. In the second, rich, honored persons, but dying early. And in the third, maladies, groans, ill health in youth, but cheerfulness in old age.
Okay. And then Twyker says the sign Aries is masculine, tropical, vernal.
Oh,
Wait.
no, just that
No,
paragraph.
yeah.
No.
I'm like, wait.
Yeah, yeah. He gives
Okay,
like,
okay, I see. Yeah. Um, well, he talks about the constellations. You think
No,
It,
just start. And those in the first decan are energetic ruling.
okay. Okay. I am not seeing.
Page
And
169.
for me, this is already Taurus.
What?
And there arises the third degree.
It's there's
Okay.
okay. Page
And
one.
when it 169, and when it is rising or containing the moon,
Yeah,
it
go a
denotes
little
those.
lower.
Uh-huh. With a okay. And those in the first decan, I see. I see. Sorry.
It's
And
okay.
those and those in the first decan are energetic, ruling, to abandon or flee from his native land, and passing through much land and sea, and admired abroad, to turn about for a time, and having injured many things. And his father will not have an easy death, and his inheritance will be dissipated, and he will cast out his brothers, and the secret places of his body will fall away. Those in the second decan will be rich and beset by sorrows and losses and the recovery of possessions. Those in the third decan will have many toils, being involved in dangers or imprisonments. And due to hatreds, it makes them leaving their own country in youth and returning late and being separated from it again. For the most part, they have no children.
Yeah. So he has a bit more back there. We'll just leave it at that for now. If you have the book and want to read them, they're all back there. But
Yeah,
his statements are mostly along the lines of what Rhetorius says. Um,
just
so
a little bit more descriptive. And there's also like a whole section on other parts of the sign as well, like different components of the nature of the sign.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, for these Aries decans, we have like just a few small examples to just like drop some ideas about like how this works, basically. But I have one example for like the second decan of Aries. Um, and Rhetorius says, rich honored persons but die early. And like Heath Ledger has his son in this decan. And he was like an Australian actor who died at like age 28 from an accidental drug overdose. And he was like a really celebrated, famous, beloved actor, and yeah, passed away really young. So it kind of speaks with that symbolism of like that exalted son, like just so raised up, but like also, subject to those total like raises and or what's the word, ups and downs, just like fluctuations. Um, so yeah, that was just like one interesting example I found.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Yeah.
Do you have any for Aries or
Mm-mm.
okay?
I didn't go in for Aries.
Yeah, all right. Well, you want to take it away with Taurus?
Yeah, sure. In the first decan of Taurus, it makes the native rich from others and well known. In the second, it makes the youth wretched and those who escape the dangers of military service. And in the third, it makes soldiers well provided, steadfast, consistent, long lived. So this is a really interesting part because that third decan of Taurus it gets a really bad rap. It's like
So does the
best to
first.
yeah.
First decans get a lot of hate, I feel.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that, which kind of surprises me considering it's like the domicile of Venus and the
Yeah,
exaltation of the moon. Like
yeah.
if we're talking about Scorpio, like I see that, but like I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you.
Oh, I
But
do.
yeah.
All my Scorpio placements, like loving the living in the shadows.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's interesting. The first decan of Taurus, it makes the native rich from others and well known.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the Five of Pentacles for Rider Waite,
And
right?
zero, yeah.
Yeah. And they're like poor people who are, at least they're not alone, but they're definitely struggling with resources. Like that's kind of the vibe that that card tends to give. But
Mm.
like, and they're in front of a church. We were talking about this last night. I hope the audience like knows which can picture it.
Yeah.
But
I just
yeah,
feel like Rider Waite's like just the consciousness that it has sent out for the symbolism of this decan is so negative, but like it's really a pretty elegant decan. Like I know you were describing it as you should, because you have Mercury in this decan of Taurus. But like yeah, like that combination of like Mercury and Venus, like loving the natural world or like being curious about like I don't know, or like writing like really soft, like elegant poetry, or like the examples, like I just found two really quickly. Jessica Lange, like iconic,
Mm-hmm.
iconic actress.
Yeah.
Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Lot of Fortune, all in this decan, right?
Wow.
It's like she's such a powerhouse figure and actress, and she's like, it's that combination of like Mercury, like she can be anything, she's done so many hundreds of roles, and in Taurus, and like she's awfully often playing like, of course, like feminine roles, but like motherly, like I don't know if you've seen her in American Horror Story, for instance. I think that's a great example where she's like always this like ruling matriarch,
Mm-hmm.
which is just an interesting way. But like also Barbara Streisand, like has her son and Mercury in this decan as like, iconic singer, Broadway performer, legend.
Doesn't
So
Adele also have her son here? I could be mistaken. I
oh,
think I'm
she
almost
might be Taurus
positive.
too. I know she has Sun and Jupiter. Also, yeah, we wanted to just say like this is going to be kind of relaxed. So if we're like, we might just like be looking up some charts and
Oh,
just,
also, in case this wasn't like clearly stated, I think I was like offhandedly, but the first decan of Taurus is a Mercury decan. The second decan is the moon's. The third decan is Saturn's.
yes, he doesn't write that. So we'll have to say that because yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they are in the second decan.
you're right.
Um,
Yeah.
but those
But
two decans are similar.
uh-huh. I mean, the moon there is really fascinating, especially because the moon and Mercury both have this inherently communicative element to them.
Hmm.
Whereas, like, Mercury is more like books, communication, like verbal. The moon is intuitive and sensational. And I feel like that, like, really comes out with her music.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, as like that Taurus, Sun, Jupiter.
I know. Also, I feel like her son, like the fact that like for instance, like it's not she didn't get the Mercury decan, she got the Moon decan, like which is
Hmm.
so much more motherly, and like her son has like really influenced like her music since she had her first child, and like um yeah, I think that was just an interesting evolution to see how, she's always singing about her love life, but I guess like her being a mother was like a huge turning point in her life and what she sings about. So maybe that could also be a part of the moon piece of it for her.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
I know Lizzo's got Taurus placements.
Kelly Clarkson has
Oh, that's
her,
so good.
yeah,
What?
she has her son in the first decan of
Oh, okay.
Taurus, and then she has a moon Mercury conjunction in the second decan. I think that's
Okay.
that's really great. That's so cute.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I just realized Lizzo was just born like a week before Adele. Like Adele has the Sag moon and Lizzo is the Virgo moon right before her. So Lizzo has the sun in the first second, but still Jupiter in the second. So she's also got that mix of both. But she's got a Taurus Mercury in the second decan, um, conjunct Jupiter. So yeah, just yeah, interesting like singers, I guess, were is like what's coming up here.
Yeah, like singers have definitely been a trend.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
What else?
Oh yeah, Gigi Hadid is a Taurus.
Mm,
Oh my God,
uh,
Robert Pattinson too. And that's funny. He was like a vampire, the whole like neck, like
oh, what
throat
does he have in
element.
Taurus? Oh
I'm
my God,
looking it up right now. Yeah.
that's a great point. The Taurus, they were vampires. Yeah, I'd be curious to see which decan it is. Because I feel like
That
with like,
I, go ahead.
oh, okay, well, there's something about this middle decan. Like, okay, Lana Del Rey has her Venus conjunct the North Node in this decan of Taurus. And like, she has this very sultry, seductive, it's like very passive kind of way that she approaches. Like, I mean, her music is kind of all about her affairs with like men who honestly like don't treat her well. And like her kind of, I guess, not addiction, but like struggle to reconcile like her independence and like her autonomy in relationships. So I feel like with this decan for her, like the moon, we're thinking about how again
Where is
there's
her
this
moon?
her moon's in Leo. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like maybe it's speaking more to like versus the Mercury decan, right? Which is going to be like somehow gearing your thoughts and your mind towards like some more practical like application of like, for instance, Lizzo, right? She's like the super incredible flute artist, right? Like she went to
Yeah.
music school for musical performance for the flute, and she's got that sun in the Mercury decan versus like Adele, who's just this like, sing it all, belt it out, heartfelt
From the
singer songwriter.
spirit.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know.
like that that artistic like release coming from either like mental drive or like a intuitive drive, like that
Mhm.
same way that we have that like verbal versus nonverbal communication with like Mercury and the moon. I
Mhm.
definitely see that kind of coming up in a pattern here.
Yeah.
Gigi Hadid actually has her sun, Mercury, and her ascendant, double A Rodden
Wow.
rating. Yeah,
In which
all in the Mercury Decan of Taurus. Yeah.
interesting, just supermodel. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
like wow.
Yeah.
The Mercury.
And
Mhm.
and I mean we're not at the moon yet, but I think it's also very fascinating because she's like so extraordinarily thin too that
Hmm.
she has her moon in Aquarius like it's not culminating her midheavens in Capricorn, but it's still super elevated in her chart.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, the last one I'll just say that I found is Megan Fox, who also has Mercury in the second decan and the Sun in the third decan of Taurus. And is like another really well-known actress and model. Um, so
Isn't
yeah,
isn't Adele a double A too? I'm almost positive Adele is a double A rated chart.
I
Um,
am not sure.
Because if so, I know that we know Lizzo's birth chart.
Hmm.
She's talked about it for sure before. And then that's Gigi Hadid, who has spoken about astrology, Megan Fox, who has spoken about astrology.
Hmm.
Maybe there's like a trend kind of emerging here with like that Mercury, Venus having that
Hmm.
like interest in astrology as it being like
Yeah,
natural science kind of a thing.
right. That's interesting. Um,
Yeah.
Also, I know I lied, but Marilyn Monroe has her midheaven in the first decan of Taurus.
This
So,
is
once again, it's not the second, it's the Mercury decan. So there's definitely something to be said for, both, but also especially that first one for having placements of for people who were renowned for their beauty or their artistry somehow.
And like Marilyn Monroe and her sultry voice is something that like was also like very, very popular. So yeah, that's super fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I know we're like
Wait,
super off
like
the head for these Taurus decans. That was really unexpected because we said we're like
we
not doing a deep dive on all the 36 decans because we have a lot to read. So that might have been our splurge. I mean, we'll see what happens, but like we unfortunately can't go that in depth for all of these. But
yeah, that's fine.
just some food for thought. Okay, there was our Taurus reflection there. Any ideas from oh, we do have a comment from Jobu who said, okay, most of my planets are in their own decan, except the sun and moon. Or I'm sorry, except the moon and Saturn. And most of my planets are in the bounds of Jupiter. So I'm here for all the tea. Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here.
Love
That
that.
was and I appreciate your comment because one other thing I meant to say in the beginning was towards the medieval period, they eventually started talking about planets in their own decan with this like idea of a planet that is sort of like living this bohemian lifestyle that's like sort of like traveling artist or not peregrine. Peregrine is like when you have no dignity, you don't belong. But like this having just a decan is like kind of like you have this skill or like unique thing you can do or a talent that like you're somewhere for like a period of time to like be there and do that, but like it's gonna have an expiration date. Like it's not like a domicile, like owning the castle, but like you can stay here for a little while you do this thing. And a really interesting example I found yesterday when I was just looking up some charts was Danny Elfman, who is like a musical like composer for a lot of like Tim Burton's movies. But he's got let's see, the sun and Jupiter and Venus and the moon all in their own decans. Um, and I thought this was just interesting because, like, for instance, like this is a quick bio about him. Starting that he hung out with band nerds in high school, he started a band. After dropping out of high school, he followed his brother Richard to France, where he performed with Le Grand Magic Circus, an avant-garde musical theater group. With violin in tow, Elfman next journeyed to Africa, where he traveled through Ghana, Mali, and Upper Volta, absorbing new musical styles, including the Ghanaian high life genre, which would eventually influence his own music. And Elfman contracted malaria during his one-year stay and was often sick. And that was interesting too, because as we read in the which decan of it, or which decan is it? I think it's coming up in Gemini. Shoot, which decan was it? Well, anyway, this gives you the idea of what it's like when you have a lot of planets in decan. It's like you're somehow using those kind of unique specific skills or artistries that you have to like be able to get around and make it by without having like a consistent, stable lifestyle.
Yeah, there's no you're not like locked into something, which can be both like good or bad. Like some people really like that, like being a jack of all trades, master of none. I would get bored if I did the same thing for my whole life. But
Right.
other people, like that's like a stressful thing for them. So it really just kind of depends on the rest of your chart. But that is a really fascinating example.
Yeah.
I have one for Gemini that I'm just like dying to
Okay. Well,
say.
here, I'll read the decans and then we'll start talking about Gemini.
Yeah.
So, in the first decan of Gemini, the married man will not be lucky, will not be friendly, and he'll be grieved over children. In the second, he will have an unsuitable marriage, and it signifies the endurance of armies. In the third, it makes rich, honored persons ruling, but dying early. Um, so,
Johnny Depp
oh,
has his son in the second decan of Gemini.
mm,
Talk about having a unfortunate marriage. Like
yeah.
no matter we're not going to talk about like any of the nuance of that, but very publicly a
Hmm.
humongous divorce marriage trial.
Hmm.
Um and um the endurance of armies. Johnny Depp's
Hmm.
fan base has not faltered like at all. Like,
That's really great example.
yeah, his armies are like for him still.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just like could not wait to get that example out.
Yeah, that's a great one. I have to say really quick, I messed up because I forgot to mention my examples for the moon and Taurus decan. I'll say them super quickly, but they're all female, like soft or like emotional singers. Like Nora Jones has the moon in the middle decan of Taurus. So does Christina Aguilera and Demi Lovato and Mireille Mathieu, who's like a famous French singer. So like just again, interesting. But for Gemini decans, I have one for the Mars decan, the second decan. All right, so the first one is ruled by Jupiter, the middle by Mars, and the third by the Sun.
Oh
And
yeah.
so Wilhelm Grimm, who was one of the Grimm brothers, has his Mars in this decan, and it's exactly trine Mercury in Aquarius, who's also in his own decan. And we'll get to that decan, but I think it's a really interesting combination between like Mars and Gemini, and like when you do think about the tarot image of like that person that's like has nightmares, like Grimm brothers being like these super famous authors and like kind of compiled all these German folk tales into for this whole storybook of these really dark and twisted and like nightmarish hellscapes that Mars and Gemini try and like in this dark Aquarius Mercury. I think is a really interesting combination for the decan. Again, giving like some talent or skill to write dark horror stories, or to, with it's a Taurus decan, you can be a great singer, right? It's like that's going to make sense somehow. And I almost wish you included the Malethesia beforehand, because somehow we could maybe even think about how these talents or skills correlate like to the decan, because medically that was a huge purpose for like when they would do these talismans, like the second decan protects your of Aries protects your ears, or like the whatever it was, but like for instance, this Mars and Gemini, like he was a great writer, like thinking about these signs are going to incorporate the part of the body, which we'll read afterwards. But anyway.
Right. And I mean, like, there's a very horrifying element to Mars, an unsettling element with that Aquarius and that like martial energy, and being able to produce that in a way that's not too disturbing for people,
Mm,
especially because like the Grimm tales, like I heard those little scary stories when I was a kid, you know,
mhm.
and like that mercurial element of youth also like
Yeah.
playing a role in that. Yeah, that's really
Mhm.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to Cancer?
I just have a few examples for Sun Gemini. So he just talks about rulers and Trump, Bush, Boris Johnson, just like, just a few examples, like really iconic, but also super polarizing, right? Gemini figures with their sun in this decan. Also Edward Snowden, who has his sun conjunct Mars and the North Node in the third decan of Gemini. And he, basically revealed and whistleblowed a bunch of private confidential information, um, about the government. And that's really interesting, I think, to see how like it wasn't just the sun in Gemini, because like, yes, he was like a prominent government official. So like, yes, that was a part of it. But like with that Mars and North Node in there was like that rupture of information that he exposed about the sun in Gemini, like, the upper echelon of people. Um,
Mhm.
and also, Rhetorius says rich honored persons ruling but dying early. And like Tupac also like had his son in this Decan who like was a really prominent, figure in his field, but did, really unfortunately pass away um too suddenly. So once again, you're getting like, people who have either that controversial Gemini kind of dual reputation, that have rises and falls. Um,
Also, yeah, just really quickly, Kanye West,
mm,
second decan of Gemini, almost the
uh,
same exact situation as Johnny Depp, like huge
mm,
marriage controversy that's like super public.
uh,
And like Kanye still has this like super, super strong fan base. He's
mm,
lost some of it, but his fans are still ready to protect him.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you want to move on to? Oh, whoops. This just keeps happening. I just keep finding unexpectedly. ASAP Rocky has Jupiter in the first decan of Gemini. Um, yeah, and he's a pretty famous rap artist. I mean, I guess I'm curious like what it maybe is, and I know we're not even like doing like this deep dive, but like what maybe is that distinction between like the Jupiter decan, versus because it's a detriment where a decan where he's in detriment.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like that Venus and Aries decan in a way with that. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on?
I think that I don't know. I mean, when it comes to different planets, like that opens like a huge door. But I feel like Lamar with his like Jupiter and Gemini, just like from what I know about his music, Kendrick Lamar has an
Oh, I
extreme.
say ASAP Rocky.
Oh, I'm sorry, A$AP Rocky. I don't know. I That's so funny. I just read Kendrick Lamar on my on my
Oh,
computer, and that's why I said that. Um, A$AP Rocky.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't know his music very well. Didn't he? Oh wait, he had the whole Astroworld scandal, right?
No, that was oh God.
Are you sure? Who was it? Was it not ASAP? I don't keep up with pop culture. I'm
No,
sorry.
that was Travis Scott. Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah,
want to
you're
say
right.
Travis Scott's track.
Oh, well,
That
ASAP.
was such a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, that was bad.
Um, okay. Sun in the first decan of Taurus. Ooh, Mars in the middle decan of Cancer. Yeah, that'll do it. Um, but anyway, um, yeah, all right. Are we good on Gemini decans? We had some
Uh-huh.
in
I
there.
only
Oh,
have until 10, like 30, 45-ish.
okay. Also, Jobu just said real quick, this is a little from a few minutes ago. Sounds about right on the Bohemian, and I appreciate this, not finding a lot of resources on the topic. And that's been my experience. Moon is my chart ruler, so having options is a need. Yeah, definitely. Um, let's see. So yeah, do you want to just read through Cancer then?
Mm-hmm. Um, in the first decan of Cancer, it makes those engaged in public business, and they are grieved over children, exceedingly sorrowful in youth, but very fortunate in old age. In the second, the married man will be wealthy, and he will be benefited from the affairs of others, and he will be grieved by his wife. And in the third, the native will be eloquent and exceedingly sorrowful in youth, but he will enjoy himself in old age.
Mm, yeah, I love these decans.
Uh-huh, me too. And I also think it's really fascinating, like the sorrow in youth. I don't know, like I just I don't know, it just like makes perfect sense.
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know. There's something about it like I had a thought earlier when I was reading this and I can't formulate it right now. In the second, the married man will be wealthy. Oh, the decans. So, by the way, it's the first decan of Cancer is a Venus decan. The
Mhm.
second is a Mercury decan. The third is a lunar decan. So
Yeah.
that's the moon's decan in Cancer.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, one thing that I think of with these decans, first of all, Austin Coppock's favorite decan is Cancer 2, which is the ascending decan on the Thema Mundi, which is pretty significant for like, lots of reasons. Um, but also like these decans have some really interesting qualities too, like that Venus in Cancer decan. A couple of people, Natalie Portman, Courtney Cox, Stevie Nicks, Latoya Jackson, like really well-known women who
Mhm.
I guess have like an image of somehow being known for like their Venus like things in their life. Like for Stevie Nicks, of course, being super famous artist and singer, like Latoya Jackson, like being a singer, but also like the daughter, a Venus figure
Mhm.
of Michael Jackson. Um, and Natalie Portman, of course, being like a model and actress. Um, it's just interesting to think, they have this powerful planet in their own decan. Um, Carl Jung and Stanley Kubrick have Mercury in the second decan of Cancer. Carl Jung
Nice.
almost at 14 Cancer, like almost right on that Thema Mundi ascendant. Like being like one of the most profound modern psychologists who like expose the mechanism of the mind and like has Mercury and it's like on the Thema Mundi ascendant and it's unbound and Decan and like Stanley Kubrick too, who has a 15-degree Cancer Mercury, like just his own crazy inner world that like he brought onto life through horror films, I think is really interesting. And Elon Musk also has a 14-degree Cancer Mercury and like super inventive, of course, like forward thinking, futuristic minded technology guru, businessman, Mercury figure.
Also, Khloe Kardashian
Mhm.
has her sun in the third decan of Cancer, Mercury in the middle decan, Venus also
Mhm.
like in the Mercury decan, like by like a few minutes.
Oh, wow.
But I think this is really fascinating because it says the native will be eloquent and exceedingly sorrowful in youth, but he will enjoy himself in old age. Khloe
Mm.
Kardashian was miserable throughout her youth. That's something she has been very public about. She was bullied horribly for her appearance before she was ever even famous. And like she was miserable growing up. And then but then as she's gotten older, like sure, it's taken cosmetic works and whatever for her to be more comfortable in her skin, but she is doing better today than she was like 10, 20 years ago. I mean, even when you like I don't regularly watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but if you look at clips from her from when she was younger versus today, you can tell that like she's much more comfortable being able to speak her mind, whereas before she almost seemed like she was very anxious, like scared to upset anyone more than she already was.
Mm.
So I thought that was an interesting kind of
Yeah, that is. I mean, I think with also like the third decan, the moon in Cancer, there's just something so physical about that decan that is like such a call towards, I guess, like just embodiment of like what it means to be a producer, like of something like physical somehow. Like Christian Dior had his moon in this decan of Cancer, and like he was a designer who made clothes and perfumes, like just everything about the senses, that was like enhanced like to the nines. I think that's really interesting, like example.
Yeah. I mean, something fascinating about Chloe's chart is that she has a Saturn Mars conjunction in Scorpio, trine that little Cancer stellium, like
Oh,
within a 5-degree orb. So
mm,
I think that the like malefic element and the scorpionic element is something that comes out in Chloe's like particular story, like very, very prominently.
yeah. Yeah, and like Lana, she has her sun in Mars in the first decan. And I think that's interesting because being ruled by Venus, she's almost like a figure that has like not like done, I don't want to say done shame to, but like she's like embodying like a Venus that is like very almost like hurt. She's been damaged, and like Mars has fallen in Cancer, like in Venus's deck. And they're like, yes, she's a Venusian figure, being like a famous female singer, but like she embodies characteristics of a Venus that is like not, um, just pure love and happiness. It's very has a dark undertone. And I mean, Mars also rules her Scorpio ascendant. But she also has a 14-degree or 16-degree Cancer Mercury. So again, someone who's just like, and she's written all kinds of poetry and like written poetry books. And, it's like there's something just about having Mercury in that area that's like, you're going to write, you're going to read, you're going to speak, you're going to talk, you're going to like figure things out, understand how to what the essence of communication is. And like somehow that's just a huge part of your life story.
Yeah, and I mean we're not into the bounds yet, but I Taurus and Cancer are the only parts of the zodiac where Mercury has both bound and decan overlap.
Mm,
There's nowhere else in the entire zodiac where Mercury's decan and bound lines up like that. So if you have a planet that falls in the bound and the decan, it's already like that much more comfortable, suited, apt, and able to bring about its significations. And like in Lana's situation, through this like sorrowful but like illustrious
mm,
tone,
yeah.
yeah, that's really fascinating.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we move on to Leo?
Yes, we
Okay.
should.
In the first
um oh, go
decade.
ahead.
Okay. In the first, oh wait, actually, just real quick, some comments. Yeah, Jared just said my moon ascendant in the last decade of Cancer is looking forward to old age. Yeah, that's
Oh my
funny because
gosh.
there's something very youthful about that placement too. Like moon in Cancer, like just a very right. It's just like the seedling just being produced. Like I don't know. It feels so childlike, but it's funny how it's like, well, that part of life might not be where it's at for those deacon peeps.
Yeah, definitely. um really, did you say Jared said that?
Yeah, Jared
Oh
has his
my
own deck.
gosh, Jared, I have my moon there too. Mwah. I know, I can't wait until I get older.
Yeah,
Um,
cool. All right.
okay.
Well, Leo Deggans. In the first second
Yeah.
of Leo, it makes commanding and rich individuals. And in the end, he will have plenty and he'll bury his wife first. But in the second and third, so he's grouping the middle and last decans, it makes depravity and it prognosticates wickedness and it brings harm to the one living abroad. So yeah, pretty not great description there. I just have a few examples. OJ Simpson and Ted Bundy both have Saturn and Leo in this first decan, and both like very well known for their murders. So it's like ruling and commanding, but like again, it's a planet in detriment. So it's like not known for the greatest kind of thing. Like you have a
Also,
talent and skill for getting a really bad reputation about your Saturn shit.
and like the bury his wife first, like I don't know, it's just a little bit loud with
Oh my
OJ
God. I didn't
and
even.
his
Oh
situation.
my God.
Oh my
Estelle, how
God.
did I not read that? Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty damn loud if you
A little
ask
bit.
me. Yeah. I will say also Barack Obama, he has his
Mm.
son technically in the second decan, but I think that he fits that like first decan description like so beautifully. I know like I don't know, like there's just something about that that I feel is very much related to him. I don't know.
Not about Michelle.
That would be sad.
I'm like, are you foreseeing Brock's future here still? Like, what's going on?
Imagine
Oh,
like
Brock also.
writing a Go ahead.
Sorry, writing
Oh,
what?
I imagine like writing a letter to Barack Obama, like outlining like all of his like life experiences until he dies and just like sending it to him.
Oh my
I've
God.
always thought about doing that for celebrities with like really well rated birth times.
You should. You should go do that.
It would be a good way to become like a celebrity astrologer.
Yeah, or they like come after you. Like, not in a good way.
Yeah,
Probably not to
true.
Obama. Like,
I
but
know, like the
while we're talking,
CIA.
yeah, while we are talking, he does have Venus in that first decan of Cancer. So interesting decan there. I mean, thinking about him as very like benevolent ruler, like just did a lot of like things to just calm our country down. Like it was a relatively peaceful and calm time. As much as there was
Mhm.
angst about like progression, like in getting society to move forward, like things like went smooth
Right.
pretty
I
much.
mean, like there was a like huge recession, but he was the one he made like enormous
The most of
steps
that.
towards like us like adopting any form of socialism,
Mhm.
making healthcare affordable to people
Mhm.
and like the what is it called? The I don't know. It's this act for technology so that impoverished youth like aren't able to do homework or anything like that because they don't have a phone or computer to do homework on. There was an act so that they could have access to computers and stuff like that.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
He does have Mercury ruling his moon and Mars in the first decan of Leo. So he's got that
Hmm.
decan turned on for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last three that I had were kind of also go together. They all have Saturn and Leo in the first decan. Elton John, David Bowie, and Freddie Mercury. Three super powerful male performance artists and singers who struggled with their queer identity as a really public thing about who they are. And I think that's really interesting that they all have a first decan Leo Saturn in terms of like that, again, detriment Saturn, like a non-typical expression of that solar male archetype at all. It's like whether that literally manifested as being known as a murderer for the first two guys, but for all these three, it was like immense fame and renown and success, like that ruling quality of this first decan, the command and authority it has, but while experiencing some severe, hatred from other people, which is common to all five of them. And Hitler has a Leo Saturn too, and I meant to look at his chart to see where things are. Um, but those were all my Leo examples. So we can also move on to Virgo if you want.
Okay. Um in the first, okay, picking back up with Rhetorius. Oh, we didn't say the actual planets, did we?
Oh, we did, but Hitler's
The
MC is in the first decan.
Yikes.
Mhm.
Okay. That's interesting. So Saturn, the first decan of Leo is actually Saturn's decan. The second is Jupiter, and the third is Mars, which
Mhm.
is interesting to me that the
The
first decan
Jupiter
is
gets bad rap.
yeah, I feel
I'm
like that
like very
might
offended by that.
I feel like that might have been a mistake, honestly, because the second description fits so perfectly with Saturn and Leo. Like in the second and third, it makes depravity and it prognosticates wickedness and brings harm to the one living abroad. That applies perfectly with both Saturn and Mars being the second and third. I
Mm,
think that Jupiter still has that middle decan, unless I think that Jupiter still has that middle decan, but maybe he like flip-flopped the like when he was writing it down, flip-flopped the order.
maybe. I mean, Teucer says those born in the first decan are fond of their brothers, mountaineers, and toilsome. According to the second, they're regal, bold, high minded, ruling, short-lived and losing their inheritance. And according to the third, dirty, grim-looking, chilling, wealthy, commanding on foreign service, showing kindness to many, but also mistreating many, casting off brothers and putting them to death improperly. So I feel like it doesn't make sense. The Jupiter Leo decan is like, I mean, think of the Six of Wands, you know, like the
Right.
coming in on your with your laurels crowned, like it's a very positive decan generally. So it was probably a mistake, like you said, I feel like as well.
Yeah, and also where it says it prognosticates wickedness brings harm to the one living abroad, the second and third decan.
Mhm.
The ninth place from Leo is ruled by Mars. So I don't know. That just like
Hmm.
makes sense. If you have your sun in the Mars decan of Leo, the ninth place from there can serve as place of danger for you.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Um,
Virgo.
yes.
So in the first decan of Virgo, it makes dangers, and the natives swiftly become orphans. But in the second and third, it makes those who will become rich through connections with women, but they will be grieved over parents and children.
Mm,
So the first decan of Virgo is the sun's, the second is Venus's, and the third is Mercury's. Now, this is really fascinating. Um, I think that first of all, I think it's really interesting that Virgo Venus's fall within that decan, she has like a ton of bound
yeah,
and
bound decan.
yeah, and then Jupiter takes up the remainder of that Venus decan.
Mm,
So, yeah. And also, like, it starts out with dangers. Okay, the sun in Virgo is peregrine, can't see its domicile, can't see its exaltation.
mm,
Um, but then in the second and third, it makes those who will become rich through connections with women. Beyonce has her son in the second decan of Virgo,
mm,
and she has just been a female icon forever. Like, women have always loved her. She is such a bad bitch. Love you, Beyonce. Um, and then I don't really know much about her parents and children. Um, do you know anything about like her personal life?
Beyonce.
She's like super private. I don't know if I've ever heard anything about like her family or whatever.
Yeah, I can't really say I know her personal life super well. One
Do
thing
you
interesting with Virgo, Pablo Escobar, who was like a famous drug lord, has a Mars Saturn conjunction in the second decan of Virgo, in the Venus decan of Virgo, which I think is interesting because, like, okay, first of all, Mars Saturn, right? Not like yikes a little bit, but in like the Venus Virgo decan, which is like the organized, like proper, like pretty easy, like it was not that for him in his life. Like he was also a Pisces rising, so it was his seventh house, so he had lots of enemies for sure. Literally murdered lots of people, had got lots of people murdered. um but in Virgo, I actually feel like the malefics kind of do well in Virgo, so that is kind of interesting that like they were both pretty productive here, in
I
terms of
mean,
manifesting.
like for the bounds,
Mhm.
the bound of a planet's fall, so like Venus is bound in Virgo, like Demetra talks about that being like a bad thing, like it's a challenge for that planet to be responsible for a bound if it falls in the sign already. um but like Venus and Virgo always just reminds me of like drug use, abuse, things like that.
Mhm.
I feel like, or fallen or afflicted Venus more broadly, because I feel like drugs and like substances to experience that pleasurable feeling is a
Yeah.
very Venusian thing. And
Mhm.
when Venus is afflicted in some way, that can be abusing that thing that makes you feel good, or in Pablo Escobar's case, making money based off of it, with like that mercurial element too is very fascinating. Yeah.
It's a really great point. Um,
Hmm.
and then my three other people for the Virgo Venus decan are four: Charlize Theron, Julia Roberts, Pink, and Gwen Stefani. all have Venus in the second decan of Virgo, and they've all got hate for being women that have cut their hair. And I thought that was really interesting too, like the fallen Venus, like not traditional woman archetype, like, no, I'll cut my hair and look sexy as hell. And like just the flack they got from their public image shifting when they did all cut their hair at different stages. Like, I thought that was interesting that they all had a very similar Venus placement in that decan.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you want to move on to Libra?
yeah, let's do it.
This, or do you want to do Libra back to Pisces next time? Because I have to get going in a
I was
minute.
just gonna say, should
This
we
might be a
maybe?
good stopping point.
Yeah, so let's just, yeah, we are gonna come back because
Yeah.
this was a great chat.
Let
Um,
us know. Do you guys like all of the chart examples for this? How do you feel about
yeah,
this?
I
Yeah.
hope they do.
I hope you do
Um,
too.
but yeah, so let's plan to come back to finish. We definitely overestimated what we were going to chat about, which is fine. But we will get into the rest of the chapters another week or next week. So yeah, I guess like any final thoughts on the first 18 decans
Um,
here?
I just think it's like so crazy how important these decans are. Like look to the decan of your ascendant, your sun, your moon, see what that says about you.
Heaven.
Yeah.
A lot of spirit.
Definitely. Yeah. Because
Um,
this is a little bit different than just like straight up dignity, it seems. It
mhm.
has a very loud archetypal manifestation in your
Right.
life.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's cool too because like a lot of the ancient like passages on them like do reference like how constellations have certain effects on the decan, like somehow having the dog star, falling here is going to make someone more voracious, like a stronger appetite, or they, talk louder or more, briskly or gruffly or whatever. It's not even a word,
hmm
but like just that, like that very visceral way that like the image of a constellation affects what's manifesting there. Like the horns of the bull and goat and the ram, like make people more horny, like things like that. Like it's very literal. And so that's an interesting way that the Decans, I think, put in their like swapping or smushing the sphere like into the 36 segments is like a really cool way to, yeah, look at things.
Yeah, I agree. It's super fascinating. It's super fascinating. I mean, even just like looking at my own chart and kind of like reflecting on that, like it does make perfect sense. Like you're right. I
Mhm.
do be like that.
Yeah. So yeah, well, next time we'll be back then with Libra through Pisces, and we'll have more examples, and maybe we'll read a few more excerpts from Teucer, maybe to just contrast them, or even from maybe we'll bring Hephaesio into it. He's got some good delineations too. But even if we have more time, like we could just read more of Teucer on the Decans because he's got several pages of different things relating to like money or campaigns or acquisition or speech, that he's talked about planets in certain decans. So yeah, we'll be back. Does anyone here have any final like comments before we sign off? Um, we do have a few other people say some things. That mellow kid said, I have my ascendant in the third decan of Cancer, and whew, I relate to looking forward to old age, or at least a later point in my life. And then a few little while later, Jobu said, yes, chart examples are great. And that mellow kid said, yes, having the chart examples helps to visualize how these placements play out in real life. So yeah, if you have any other questions or like want to like have us reference something, or like right now, if any of you guys have like a particular decan or something you want us to like kind of explore a bit, like drop it now, let us know. And
Yeah. If you guys have requests for the future, just let us know. We're super flexible with that kind of stuff. We
yeah,
might not be able to work it into our schedule right away, but we'll make a point to do it.
yeah. So, all right. Well, they're a little bit of a delay, so we'll see if anything comes in a minute.
Um, some other quick discussion. I
Yeah,
hope that everybody was enjoyed the last of Venus and
I
Pisces.
know.
Yeah, I was such a fan of that transit. I love Venus. She's such a queen. So,
Yeah,
um,
I hope everyone's enjoying the moon's enclosure today. Like this is a really cute and special moment here. So
I agree. Yeah, it's not rare, but it's not common that we
it
have the
is not,
moon
I mean, it's a
enclosed.
bodily enclosure, which is why it's
Exactly.
so special.
With no interception. Yeah, I don't know about y'all, but I can definitely feel that like fiery beneficence. I think they're also in bound reception as well. Isn't
Yeah,
Jupiter
they
in
are right now.
Venus's
Yeah,
bound?
they are.
Yeah, yeah. So they're just like sandwiching the moon, like full of love.
I know.
So, yeah, that's an
Well, I
awesome.
hope you all feel that today and that
Mhm.
um
Treat yourself to a good meal.
yeah, I said like on my oh, Jared said I have a meeting when it's on the MC. Sad. Well, sad
Oh,
face. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is it a good meeting or a
could the meeting like turn out in your favor? Because it's culminating and in your 10th, whole sign 10th.
yeah.
So
Ooh, I wanted
maybe
to do something with the first lunar mansion to protect me from the upcoming Mars and Cancer transit. Yeah, that could be a good idea for some of you Cancer folk. Especially with eclipse season running around while he's running amok up in Cancer. Probably, yeah. Oh, and
yeah.
then that mellow kid said today's benefic closure is such a relief as a Cancer rising. Oh yeah, all you Cancer risings made it in today. Such a relief as a Cancer rising because the last few weeks have been rough. Oh, so Venus in your ninth hasn't been the best for you. Um, Honestly, it was an okay time for me. Like Venusian wise, it was not very Venus in Pisces for me. Um, so that was kind of, I don't know, interesting. But that's also because of my monthly revolution and perfections. Like Venus was, it's not her month.
I like loved this Venus and Pisces transit, but I felt like the Sun Saturn situation that we had with
Yeah.
like the Mercury, just like literally get the fuck out of Capricorn, please. Like
Yeah.
that whole thing, like definitely put a drag on Venus and Pisces.
Mhm.
Because yeah, that Sun Saturn situation was not fun for me at all. But like ninth house wise, like that little sliver of my chart was like so great. But like the Sun Saturn, I was like,
Mm, yeah.
yeah,
Well, when Mercury went into Aquarius, I know I was like, that was such a huge relief because it felt like he was in Capricorn for ages. But yeah, I know. And then before we know it, we're gonna have like that Mercury Saturn conjunction, and then Mercury goes into Pisces, and then like
Saturn follows right
Saturn
after.
goes right after him. Like it's so crazy to me that we're already in the like solar month, like the sun in Pisces, where like this is that sun's gonna be in that sign, like well, Saturn. Like we no longer have any month left before like it's like a week and a
Yeah,
half away. Like what the
I'm really interested to see how this shift will affect me because like I don't know about y'all, but like I was not an astrologer before Saturn was domicile. Like I was not involved with astrology really like in any kind of meaningful way at all. And so like with Saturn's ingress into Pisces, it'll be really interesting to feel that kind of shift in the energy, like and how that is going to change. I don't know. Like Saturn has just been domicile as long as I've known about Saturn being domicile.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, we have a few more comments. So Jared said instead of doing magic, I have to update my boss on my project. So yeah, well, maybe maybe next month.
I have
Might be
also
late to protect from Mars and Cancer, but next Aries moon, maybe.
I have been seriously like, I don't know, kind of because I've been so busy lately, I have not been able to like actually make like do magic in the way that I want to consistently. And so like just making a point to like take a moment and like speak with the planets or like make yourself some food really quickly and like make it like a magical thing and eat it. Like even if it's before they culminate or like shortly after, like that like magic can be like such a quick and easy thing even if you can't really do a whole ritual in the way you want to.
Mhm.
So I hope that you have the time to even just like make food magical.
Yeah, or even like if you can you get them on the descendant? I mean, I know
Mm-hmm.
that might not be ideal with the Libra rising, like Venus and I mean
Yeah.
it all depends, but then you'd get at least Cancer in the 10th. Um, so you could have the moon ruling like the end of the operation or like the goal of the operation. Um, but anyway,
Alrighty.
um, we'll let a few more things. Joba said, woo woo to, I know, I'll just read them. Woo woo to us, Cancer risings. And then that Mellow Kid, yes, all the Aquarius and Cap activity in my seventh, eighth house has been exhausting. At this point, I'm begging Saturn enter Pisces. Jared said that Mercury Saturn conjunction is wild because Mercury goes under the beams, then conjoins Saturn, then Saturn emerges all at the last few degrees of Aqua. And that Mellow Kid, I got into astrology around when Saturn conjoined my Aqua Uranus. So I'm looking forward to what my astro journey will look like when Saturn enters Pisces. And Jared said, oh, good idea. Good idea. I'll grab some cheese during moon hour. That's perfect. And oh, Mellow Kid, moving food during moon hour. Amazing. Ah, oh, yes. Yeah, classic. Everyone's always eating or napping during moon hour. But yeah, all right. So I know Stella has to get running. So we're gonna sign off and see you guys next week. But thanks for hanging out and we'll chat to you later. Happy
Hi
decaning.
friends, happy facing.
Bye bye.
Bye.